I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do is compare versions of old video games. And this time, it ain't very nice. Hey bub, I'm Joe and this is Same Name Different Game. Hugh Jackman's final turn as Wolverine is coming to theaters this Friday in Logan. Now, I am really excited for this movie, and if the bump in quality is the same as it was from X-Men Origins Wolverine to The Wolverine, then this movie is going to be straight up amazing. To celebrate, I figured I would take a look at one of Wolverine's earliest solo video game outings, Adamantium Rage. But before we get to the games, let's get started with a little history. On the off chance you don't know, Wolverine, aka Logan, aka James Howlett, is a Marvel Comics character. In fact, for a long time, he was arguably their most popular character, appearing in several books every month. Created by Len Wein and John Romita Sr., he made his first appearance in The Incredible Hulk issue number 180 in 1974. He was made an X-Man in 1975's Giant Size X-Men number 1. He's also been a member of the Avengers alongside Marvel's other top stars. Wolverine truly came into his own with a limited series in 1982 written by Chris Claremont and penciled by Frank Miller, and he's continued to be one of the most popular and well-known characters in comics. His popularity increased with the release of the Fox X-Men cartoon in the early 90s, and of course, his portrayal by Hugh Jackman in the X-Men films starting in 2000. With Wolverine dead in the comics, yeah, it's a long and kinda stupid story. And Hugh Jackman saying that this is his final performance as the character, the future of Wolverine is a little bit up in the air. But no one stays dead in comics forever, and I'm sure Fox isn't ready to let their silver screen cash cow go so easily, so I suspect we will see more of James Howlett in the future. When it comes to video games, Wolverine is the only X-Man to get any solo games. His first game appearance was in LJN's extraordinarily bad, even by LJN standards, Uncanny X-Men for the NES in 1989. His first solo outing was a mere 2 years later in LJN's also bad but not quite as bad because dude, X-Men on the NES is super bad, Wolverine. And in the intervening years, he's appeared in at least one game on every console generation, in games ranging from Marvel Ultimate Alliance to the X-Men Origins Wolverine video game, which, by all accounts, is much better than the movie that inspired it. In this episode, we'll be looking at Wolverine's second starring role in a video game, Adamantium Rage, released in 1994 for the Super NES and Sega Genesis. The Super NES version was published by LJN, while the Genesis version came under the Acclaim label. It's the same company. And, just to brace you, neither one of them is what you'd call good. But let's first take a look at the Super NES version, developed by Bits Studio. If you know anything about Bits, you know that they're responsible for utterly unplayable licensed dreck, like a grip of terrible Spider-Man games, Last Action Hero for the Super NES and the Genesis, and Terminator 2 for the Genesis. No, not that one. Yeah, that one. So yeah, you should have some idea of what's in store here. And I'm not especially happy to say that this isn't exactly their hidden masterwork or anything like that. The title screen is the best thing about this game. When you start playing, you immediately find that the controls are incredibly stiff. Attacking can be done with 4 separate buttons, but the only one you'll probably use is X for the claw attack. You can do a kick, but you automatically step forward when doing it, so you'll typically miss your target. You can punch, but it's the same as a claw attack and doesn't do as much damage. Just stick with X for the most part. You can't use your claws while jumping for some reason, and jump kicking is a chore as well. The timing has to be spot on for Wolvie to actually do the jump kick. Turning around midair works sometimes, but not others. Pressing up makes you do this stupid jumping tuck roll, but holding up and jump makes you do an extra high jump. Except you do the tuck roll first when you hit up, so you have to get the timing perfect there as well, and it's a total headache. I think people who watch this show know that I'm not prone to hyperbole, so let me be very clear when I say these may very well be the worst controls I have ever encountered in a Super Nintendo game. In a 16-bit game, maybe in any game I have ever played. Getting Wolverine to do the most pedestrian of tasks, like jumping up to the next platform, is often migraine-inducing. Then there's the level design. The stages are all these sprawling platform affairs, almost like Power Blade, but, without the focused platform design or responsive controls that make traversing them any fun. The goals are also totally unclear. You have this counter in the lower corner. That's how many enemies you have to dispatch before leaving the stage, but the game doesn't actually tell you that. And the enemies you have to dispatch? No idea which ones they are, because the game doesn't indicate them in any way. So basically, you just wander around the stages aimlessly, floundering around enemies until you eventually kill them, and hope that the counter goes down by 1. You keep doing this until the game tells you you can leave. Then you wander around searching for an exit. There are cutscenes that tell some kind of story, and there's an attempt at comic styling, but they look incredibly bad, so that's not even a bonus. The music is nothing to write home about, and the graphics aren't particularly good, although I guess they're not the most hideous thing on the system. This game should be high on your to-be-avoided list, unless you are a huge, and I mean like collecting every piece of merchandise that bears his likeness, huge Wolverine fan. This game is, no exaggeration, a nigh unplayable mess. But how does the Genesis version stack up? This version was done by Teeny Weeny Games, a developer that, as their name implies, focused more on portable titles than home consoles. It's a completely different game that more or less follows the same story. Right away, I feel better about this one, since the opening cutscene looks a lot better. Clearly, much more care went into these, and they do actually look like comic panels. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from there. The levels are often the same locales, but with completely different layouts. More linear in focus this time, but still not very interesting. At least you don't have to kill a certain number of enemies to move on, which is good, because every enemy in this game takes about 5,000 hits and dishes out a ton of damage. I mean, look at this dude in the lab coat. One of my favorite things about Wolverine in the comics is how he's a total pushover chump when matched against his arch-rival, generic lab tech man. And look at how you knock them back. Having a combo attack isn't useful when the first part of it knocks the enemy out of range of the follow-up. Mercifully, the controls are a little less busy this time. There are only 2 attack buttons, but the button layout itself is terrible, putting jump on A. People talk a lot about the right and true NES control scheme of A jumps, B shoots, and any game that violates that is at least docked a few points, but nobody really talks about the Genesis. So let me break it down for you. A lot of games with 2 attacks would assign the jump button to B. That way you have equal access to your 2 attacks. Some games would put it on the C button in an attempt to ape the right and true NES control layout. This was especially the case if there was a special attack or a limited attack you didn't use all that frequently, which they could assign to A. This game, however, assigns the jump to A and the claw to C, so I end up having to do this weird contorted finger thing so that I have equal access to the jump and claw buttons. Wolverine has a lot of moves again this time around, even with the reduced number of buttons, but only about 2 are useful, and I'm really stretching the definition of useful here. You also have a timer, which kills you instantly when it expires, the storyline reason being LCD catches up to you, which, okay, sure. I guess she's in the Super NES version too, but I wandered around one stage for a really long time, and she never showed up, so I don't know, whatever. Speaking of characters, the Genesis version also features an appearance by Sabretooth, which the Super NES doesn't have, so that's a thing. I also want to highlight that both versions feature a hallucinatory stage brought on by Cyber, and they have totally different aesthetics, which, sure, that's theoretically cool, but neither is very interesting. Quite honestly, both of these are less nightmare-inducing than Wolverine's Toy Room Fever Dream stage in Spider-Man X-Men. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but neither of these games is anything special in the audiovisual department, but still, we always like to take a look and a listen side by side, so let's go ahead and do that. From an audiovisual perspective, I guess they're both competent. I like the graphics of the Genesis a bit more, and the music of the Super NES a bit more. And that makes it time to give the edge. So again, just to be totally upfront here, both of these games are really bad. But the slightly worse version is definitely the Super NES version. This game isn't just one of the worst games to feature X-Men. It's not just one of the worst Marvel licensed games. It's not just one of the worst games in the Super NES library. This game is legitimately one of the worst games I have ever played. It is a fitting piece of Bit's almost exclusively garbage legacy, and you are better off not playing it. If you want your Wolverine fix on the Super NES, check out X-Men Mutant Apocalypse from Capcom. On the Genesis, Adamantium Rage isn't much better, but for what it's worth, which isn't much in this case, it does get the edge. Still, I wouldn't recommend it. And much as I said with Spider-Man and the X-Men, you are better off playing both of Sega's X-Men games on the Genesis instead of that one. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's all hope that Logan is a much better film than Adamantium Rage is a video game. And I will see you right here next month on same name, different game.